My name is Naomi Anderson. I'm 30 years old and live in a quiet neighborhood just outside Cincinnati, Ohio. I work as a financial manager for a major investment firm. My days are packed with meetings, constantly shifting market indexes, and hard numbers I learned to master at a very young age. If you'd asked me what family meant 10 years ago, I could have offered a sweet little lie. But now, I have no need to sugarcoat anything. My family wasn't a place of safety. It was a system, carefully built to drain me dry, emotionally and financially. I'm the eldest daughter of my mother, Carolyn Anderson, a woman with a polished appearance but a core of cold steel. To her, image mattered more than truth. Everything had to be perfect, spotless, and aligned with the ideal family brand she worked so hard to create since she was young. Then there's Brady, my younger brother by 3 years, the perpetual golden child in her eyes. He dropped out of college halfway through, launched 3 businesses that all failed in less than 4 years, and still lives rent-free in the guest house behind her backyard. Yet to her, he's the creative one who just needs another chance. How long did it take me to realize I wasn't the chosen child? Maybe since I was 13. When she told me to give up my birthday money so Brady could attend summer basketball camp. "You're the older sibling. You should know how to sacrifice," she said, counting the bills I'd saved all year. I remember that night in 12th grade like it was yesterday. While my friends were busy trying on prom dresses, I sat filling out scholarship applications. My parents said they couldn't afford both SAT tutoring and prom. I chose what mattered. No one thanked me, but I got a full-ride scholarship. Brady? Every time he ran into trouble, my mother smoothed it over. I used to think he was just unlucky. Now I know. He never learned accountability, because someone always shielded him, and I was forced to be strong before I even understood what fairness meant. When I graduated with honors and landed a job at a fund management company, nobody asked if I was happy or tired. But when Brady launched his first startup and e-commerce website that vanished without a trace 3 months later, they threw a celebration like he'd been invited to teach at Harvard. At 28, I became the company's first female director, earning a 6-figure salary with a private office overlooking the city park. I sent a group text to my family. My mom read it, but didn't respond. 2 weeks later, she called to congratulate me. "Brady needs funding for a new startup," she said casually, as if I were an ATM. "We're family, Naomi. You should understand that." I gripped my phone, trying to stay calm. "Mom, that's my money. I'm not agreeing to this. That money came from years of raising you. Nothing you have is entirely yours." I laughed dryly. "So you raised me just to serve the family? I don't owe anyone." She froze, then snapped like she'd slapped me across the face. "No one needs an ungrateful daughter." I hung up. My chest felt like it had been hit with a hammer. But I didn't cry. I had survived what they called a family, but this time, I wouldn't live just to please others. 3 weeks after that call, I got a short email from her. "Brady has a solid business plan. We need $80,000. Consider it an investment in our family's future." No greeting, no question mark. I read that sentence 3 times. The way she used "we" made my stomach twist. In her world, family always meant Brady and whoever's funding him. I didn't respond. 3 days later, during a partner meeting, my phone buzzed. It was Brady. "Can you send $40K up front? Mom said you'd help." I set the phone down and stared at the screen, as if it could somehow explain how absurd this all was. That night, I called. "What gives you the right to ask me for money? You make plenty. Why keep it all to yourself?" Brady replied, sounding like we were discussing lunch. I took a deep breath. "You already burned through our parents' money in 3 failed startups. You're over 20 grand in credit card debt and still have the nerve to ask for more? Because this idea will work. Just help me one last time." I laughed, bitter. You've said last time 3 times already. Then I hung up. 2 days later, my mother showed up at my office, unannounced. She walked in like she owned the place, eyes scanning the room before settling on my oak desk, the one I chose myself the day I became director. "Not bad," she said. "Looks like you've come a long way." I stood up, voice steady. "If you came to talk, you should have made an appointment." She ignored me. "Brady needs you. The whole family needs you. And you're being selfish." "Not being selfish. I'm refusing to be used. We raised you. You can't just turn your back on family." "You didn't raise me, you controlled me, and I survived despite it." Her eyes blinked rapidly. She stood there like a fallen general, still proud but trembling at the edges. Then she left without a word. I thought that was the end of it. But on Monday morning, I was called to the lobby. The receptionist, pale-faced and trembling, handed me a large envelope. "I'm sorry. The man said you needed to sign for this." I opened it on the spot. The first line made my hands clench. "Petition for full conservatorship on the grounds of mental instability and impaired decision-making?" I froze in the lobby, under a sea of curious stares and quiet pity. They didn't just want money. They wanted control over my bank accounts, my assets, my legal autonomy. They wanted to turn me into a zipped-up wallet, mouth closed, opened only when convenient. In the break room, under the buzzing fluorescent lights, I read every line of that document. Each argument was polished, rehearsed, like it had been drafted long ago, in case I stopped cooperating. I opened my laptop. I'd kept every message, every voicemail, every email they ever sent me, like a survival instinct. One by one, I opened the files and hit play. "If you don't agree, don't blame me for escalating this. Brady is the future of this family. All you're good at is making money. Just be obedient and everything will stay calm." That familiar, cold voice played through my headphones. I felt like I had slipped back into the past, being blamed, manipulated, drowning in guilt for things I hadn't even done. But this time, I wouldn't stay silent. I called Nico, my best friend from college, now an attorney. "This is serious," I said. "How serious?" "My family is literally trying to take away my freedom." "Then they picked the wrong person to mess with," he said. I stared at my laptop screen one last time before closing it. Everything had changed. They started this war. Now it was my turn to fight back. That night, I got home late. Rain streaked down the windows, like old memories sliding back into place. I sat alone in my 18th floor apartment, city lights flickering in the distance, feeling nothing but a heavy emptiness in my chest. Under the bed was an old box where I kept things no one would expect. A flip phone from college, a pocket recorder, scraps of paper with conversations I'd never forgotten. I used to think I was paranoid for saving them. Now, I knew better. I plugged the USB into my laptop. Dozens of folders popped up. I organized them by year. 2012 through 2023, each audio file labeled by date. Some recordings I had forgotten. But when the voices played, my mother's, Brady's, they hit like icy wind through a broken window. "The more money you make, the more grateful you should be. If you don't help Brady, don't blame me when people say you're unstable. Don't think a college degree makes you better than anyone else." I sat frozen, listening to my own voice, young, hesitant, answering back. Each clip was a snapshot, exposing the subtle control I'd been subjected to nearly my entire life. I called Nico immediately. He picked up after the first ring. "I need you," I said. "Been waiting for you to say that," he replied, voice calm. "Send me everything. Every recording, message, anything we can use." The next morning, we met at a quiet coffee shop downtown, laptop open, headphones on. Nico worked like we were already in court. "This part," he said, pausing a clip, "she says, 'If you don't obey, we'll handle you like someone mentally unfit.'" That one line could unravel their whole conservatorship case. I nodded, lips pressed together. These files weren't just evidence to defend myself. They were proof of a broken system where love was wielded as a weapon of control. "Didn't you say your mom hid someone?" Nico asked while marking another timestamp. I paused, then nodded slowly. "My aunt. I found her name on an old envelope hidden in a storage cabinet when I was in high school. My mom said she died a long time ago." "Name? Isabel? Isabel Matthews? My mom's maiden name is also Matthews." Nico froze, eyes narrowing. "Isabel Matthews is currently a family attorney in Richmond, Virginia. Is this her?" He turned his laptop toward me. A woman in her 60s appeared on the screen. Silver hair pulled back into a bun, sharp eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses. My heart skipped a beat. I had never met her, but the curve of her mouth, uncannily familiar. "That's her," I whispered. "We need to go see her. She might know a lot more than you think." 3 days later, I stood outside a red brick building in Richmond's historic district. A small brass plaque by the door read, "Isabel Matthews, Family Law and Asset Protection." I walked in, no appointment, no warning. I knew that if I hesitated, I'd never go through with it. The receptionist looked up, eyes narrowing. "Do you have an appointment?" "I need to see Mrs. Isabel. Tell her Naomi Anderson is here." "She'll want to hear that name." The woman hesitated, then nodded and disappeared behind a frosted glass door. A few minutes later, a woman stepped out. It was her. The moment she saw me, she froze. "Naomi?" Her voice was raspy. I nodded, barely able to speak. "Lunch. I think I need to know the truth." She didn't say a word, just nodded once and opened the door to her office. Inside, the room smelled of wood and old books. I placed a manila envelope on her desk. Copies of the conservatorship petition and the first audio file Nico had extracted. She studied them carefully, eyes darkening. "You don't just need a lawyer. You need someone who knows your mother better than anyone else. And that person is you?" I'm the one she tried to erase from every document, every story. I took a deep breath. "Oh, will you help me?" Isabel looked at me for a long time, as if reading through every year I had endured. Then she nodded. "You have the evidence, and I have the past." I gripped the file tighter in my hands. It was time to piece it all together. Because this time they weren't just facing the daughter who once stayed silent. They were facing me, and the woman they had buried in silence for over 30 years. I met Isabel again 2 days later in her office. The fog hung low over Virginia, and inside her room, the air was thick, burning, and heavy, like every file on her shelf held a truth no one dared to touch. She laid a thin folder on the table in front of me, clipped together neatly. I went through all the archived records from 1993. I looked up, heart suddenly pounding. "That's the year I was born." She nodded. "Then the year Carolyn, your mother, filed for an amended birth certificate." I flipped through the pages. There were clearly 2 certificates, one original, signed at a hospital in Columbus, Ohio, with the father's name left blank, and a second one, filed 6 months later, listing Samuel Anderson, the man I'd always called my father. My eye stopped at a red seal labeled "Legally Amended" under Supplemental Parentage Clause. "She faked your father's identity," Isabel said, her voice calm but sharp. "And that carries major legal consequences," I whispered, still trying to process it. "She altered my birth certificate to bring me into the Anderson family trust?" "Exactly. Samuel's family had a private trust created by your grandfather. It was designed to be split among his legitimate heirs, which meant biological children or any child legally listed as Samuel's." A chill ran down my spine. Then why did she cut me out later if the goal was money? Isabel's hands tensed slightly. Because once the trust was activated, Carolyn had a rider clause added. If a child was deemed non-compliant with the interests of the family, their share could be redirected. It felt like my throat was closing. They brought me in to legitimize the funds, and cut me out when I stopped obeying? Brady, I said. He's the one who got everything? Isabel didn't answer. She just nodded and pulled another folder from the drawer. This is the power of attorney Carolyn signed with the bank overseeing the trust. I had to call in a favor to get this copy. I flipped through it. Every page hit like a punch. In black and white, Carolyn had authorized the transfer of nearly $300,000, the portion that should have gone to me, to an alternate designee, Brady. Did he know? I asked. Of course, Isabel replied. His signature is right there too. I closed the folder and exhaled, steadying myself. My whole life had been leveraged. When I was useful, they kept me. When I stopped playing along, I was discarded. Everything, affection, rights, identity, had been rewritten like I was just another entry in my mother's financial spreadsheet. Isabel reached for a thicker envelope. And this is the last thing you need to see. I opened it. Inside were handwritten letters on yellowing paper. A few were signed, Thomas H. Who's Thomas? I asked. Isabel inhaled deeply. An old friend of mine. And someone Carolyn was involved with. Around the time you were born. Are you saying? No one could ever confirm it because Carolyn always denied it, but in a letter he wrote before he died in a car accident in 2001, he mentioned wanting to know if he had a daughter, and the name he wrote was Naomi. It felt like the ground dropped beneath me. Isabel pulled out a copy of a recently obtained DNA test, the envelope still sealed. I took a hair sample from your brush the last time you were here, and luckily Thomas's DNA was still stored at the forensic lab. He was an organ donor. If you're ready. I nodded. Isabel opened the envelope and read the first line. She looked up, eyes glassy. Paternity confirmed. Thomas H. is the biological father of Naomi Anderson. No sound came out of me. Just the thudding of my heart, pounding like thunder in my chest. The man I'd called my father all these years wasn't. And I wasn't truly part of the family that had spent a lifetime trying to erase me. Isabel gently touched my hand. Now you have two choices. 1, use this truth to challenge the petition. Or 2, use it to start over, whether with them or without them. I looked at her. I'm choosing both. 1 week before the hearing, Isabel formally filed our legal response with the Hamilton County Court. The rebuttal to the guardianship petition spanned 4 thick binders, each nearly 300 pages long, including audio recordings, emails, a forged birth certificate, and the DNA results. We're not just denying their claim, Isabel said as I sat beside her in her office. We're exposing the entire system of manipulation they built to control you. I nodded. I'd lived in that system long enough to know every crack in its foundation. That afternoon, Nico called. I just found someone who might tear down their last line of defense. Ew, Tessa Monroe. Brady's ex. They broke up about a year ago, and it wasn't pretty. I raised an eyebrow. She agreed to talk to me? I texted her. She said yes, but she wants to speak with you alone. I met Tessa at a small cafe along the Ohio River, a place she had chosen. She showed up 10 minutes late, hair tied high, eyes cautious. Naomi? Yes, thank you for coming. She didn't sit right away, just stood there for a moment, weighing whether to go through with it. Then she pulled out the chair and sat down, still wearing her coat. I don't want to be involved with that family ever again. I understand, but they're trying to take me to court. To gain full control over my finances. Based on a lie. Tessa gave a short, humorless laugh. Sounds familiar. I pulled a small recorder from my purse and set it on the table. I won't record unless you say it's okay. She glanced at the device, then back at me. Only if you guarantee I won't be dragged into court. I promise. And I'll protect you however I can. Tessa nodded. Brady opened a credit card in my name. When I found out, he said his mom would cover it, and sure enough, the bill got paid, but not by Brady. Carolyn. Tessa nodded. She said, word for word, if you still love Brady, you'll stay quiet. If not, consider this your first lesson in sacrifice. I clenched my hands under the table. I also have a recording, Tessa said quietly. That night, Brady lost control. Screamed at me in the middle of the night just because I refused to transfer him money. I left my phone in the bedroom. It recorded everything. I swallowed hard. You still have it? Tessa pulled a USB drive from her pocket and placed it on the table. I almost deleted it, but something told me to keep it. I reached for it, and as our hands brushed, hers was cold but steady. They tried to make me feel like I was crazy. But now, no one believes they're the victims anymore. I thanked her and left the cafe as night settled deep. Back home, Nico was already waiting, laptop open, a stack of freshly printed documents beside him. Tessa is the perfect missing piece, he said. But it's not enough. I just received some bank statements from an anonymous source. Looks like someone who used to work at the bank where Carolyn had a private account. What's in them? Nico flipped through the pages. Last year, Carolyn transferred over $120,000 from her personal account to a shell company called Hayes Holdings. Listed representative, Brady Anderson. I froze. They created a fake company? Exactly. And worse, those funds came from a joint account under the name of Mr. Samuel Anderson, your legal father. I gripped the armrest of my chair. So my mother used Dad's legal name to drain his savings and funneled it to Brady. That's why they needed you declared legally incompetent. If the guardianship went through, they'd control all your assets, and no one could trace any of it. I looked at Nico. Do we have enough? More than enough to dismantle this entire web of lies. All that's left is tomorrow. In that courtroom, you have to hold your ground. We'll handle the rest. I nodded, slowly but firmly. I was no longer Naomi, who once begged for her mother's approval. I would walk into that courtroom as the only one with nothing to hide and everything to expose. Courtroom 3 at Hamilton County Courthouse was packed Monday morning. I sat beside Isabel, dressed in a dark gray suit, hands tight around the edge of my folder. Across from us, my mother, Coraline, sat next to Brady, both in light-colored outfits, faces calm like they were attending a family brunch. But I wasn't here to play their game anymore. Judge Linda Greer entered. Everyone stood. She was known for being sharp, with no patience for drama or vagueness. Her eyes swept across the room before tapping the gavel gently. We will now hear the petition for full conservatorship over Miss Naomi Anderson. Counsel for the petitioners, you may proceed. A man stood. Colton Hayes, their attorney, oozing smug confidence. Your Honor, my clients, Mrs. Carolyn Anderson and her son Brady Anderson, are gravely concerned about Ms. Naomi Anderson's declining mental stability and erratic financial behavior. Over the past year, she has cut off contact with her family, refused financial support, and exhibited extreme actions such as refusing to be exploited? Isabel interjected, rising smoothly. Excuse me, but we will respond to each allegation with documented evidence. Colton hesitated, then nodded stiffly. Isabel walked to the front. Her voice was calm, clear, unwavering. Naomi Anderson, aged 30, is the financial director of a private investment firm with an impeccable career record, no debt, and no psychological or medical history of concern. Every claim of financial instability here is unfounded and rooted in personal agendas, not facts. She laid a binder on the judge's bench. This file includes her financial records, an independent psychological evaluation, and direct evidence. Texts, voicemails, audio clips, proving my client has been the victim of prolonged emotional abuse. Judge Greer flipped through the file, her brow furrowed. We also have a recording submitted by a third-party undid document, documenting a conversation between Mrs. Carolyn Anderson and her son Brady, discussing how to manipulate Naomi into transferring family funds. I glanced at my mother. She didn't blink. The courtroom filled with the sound of their voices. If she won't agree to send the money, let the lawyer handle the conservatorship. Once we get access to the accounts, we can do whatever we want. Just be subtle. She's always sensitive. Everyone already thinks she's unstable. A wave of murmurs swept across the room. The judge raised her hand to stop the audio. Mrs. Anderson, do you confirm this is your voice? Carolyn remained composed. I may have said it in a moment of frustration, but it was taken out of context. We have the full 22-minute recording, Isabel said coldly, and more than that. She held up a sealed envelope. A certified DNA test from an independent lab. Conclusion. Naomi Anderson is not the biological daughter of Mr. Samuel Anderson. This nullifies the petitioner's legal standing to request guardianship. The entire courtroom held its breath. The judge opened the file, scanned quickly, then looked directly at Carolyn and Brady. Under Ohio state law, an individual without biological or legal guardianship ties has no right to petition for conservatorship over a mentally competent adult. Colton Hayes shot to his feet. Your Honor, you should sit down, the judge interrupted. This court will review whether the petition constitutes an abuse of the legal system for personal gain. She turned to the district attorney seated in the front row. Given the evidence submitted, I am referring this matter to your office for formal investigation into financial fraud, document falsification, and conspiracy to defraud. Brady slammed his hand on the table. This is all made up. Naomi's destroying the family over a few damn papers. The judge struck the gavel. Mr. Anderson. One more outburst and I'll have you removed by security. I stood and walked to the witness stand. I'm not destroying this family. I'm simply refusing to let them keep destroying me as if I'm some kind of asset to be exploited. I turned and looked at my mother. They used to think I was weak, but this time, I'm not staying silent. Judge Greer closed the file. The court denies the guardianship petition. Effective immediately, the petitioners are barred from financial access to the respondent. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down. Carolyn turned to me, her expression hollow. You'll regret doing this. I looked her in the eye, unshaken. No, Mom. I'd regret it if I didn't. 3 weeks after the hearing, I received a letter from Judge Linda Greer's office. Inside was the final court ruling. The guardianship petition was permanently dismissed, along with a compensation order for emotional distress and reputational damage totaling $175,000. To be jointly paid by Carolyn and Brady. I read the number over and over. Not for the money, but because for the first time, the legal system stood with me, not them. That same week, I was summoned to the district attorney's office to give a full statement for the criminal investigation now officially underway. They weren't just looking into falsified documents and misuse of trust funds. The case had expanded into potential organized financial fraud. The prosecutor's lead attorney was blunt. If the evidence holds, Mrs. Carolyn Anderson could face multiple years in prison. Brady, too. I didn't feel triumphant. Just a quiet stillness, like the air after a storm. On Monday morning, I arrived at Cincinnati City Hall to complete my legal name change. They handed me a fresh form, the old name crossed out. Naomi Anderson changed to Naomi Reeves. I signed without hesitation. I no longer belonged to a name that had been used to trap me for 30 years. Outside City Hall, it was lightly raining. Isabel waited for me on the steps, holding 2 cups of hot coffee. As I approached, she handed me one and smiled. Your father would be proud. I gently squeezed the paper cup. I think so too. That afternoon, I went to the cemetery where Thomas Reeves was buried. A simple grave, the gray headstone worn by time. I sat beside it and pulled out a small laminated sheet. The DNA test result. I placed it beneath the stone next to the headstone, saying nothing. Not because I needed his confirmation anymore, but because I wanted him to know he hadn't been forgotten. As I returned to the car, Isabel asked, "Have you thought about doing something for kids like you? Ones who've been erased by their own families?" It was quiet for a moment. Then I said, "I want to start a scholarship fund." "Under whose name?" I smiled. "Thomas Reeves, for the overlooked kids." 3 weeks later, the Reeves Foundation for the Overlooked officially launched, with Isabel's legal backing and funding from the compensation I had received. The foundation's mission: to provide scholarships and legal support to teens and young adults who had been abused, disowned, or silenced by their families, whether through words or through silence. The first application I read was from a 17-year-old girl in Dayton. She had been kicked out of her home for reporting her brother's assault. No relatives, no one believed her. When I reached the final line of her letter, which read, "I just need someone to believe I'm not crazy," I broke down in tears. The feeling of being doubted, of being pushed aside, I know it far too well. Since the day the trial ended, I haven't returned to my old office. Not because I gave up, but because it was time to spend my energy on what truly matters. Most of my days now pass in a small room at the Scholarship Foundation's office, where children who were once overlooked finally find their voice. No one here calls me someone who needs monitoring. No one questions my stability. Here, there are only stories waiting to be heard, and handwritten letters in shaky, fragile script. Titles don't matter anymore. I'm no longer listed in anyone's inheritance plan, no longer shoved into a mold someone else designed. Not a shadow, not a tool for others to manipulate with silence or guilt. That fall, when the trees by the river turned shades of amber and rust, I bought an old wooden desk and placed it by the window of my small apartment. Next to it, a lavender plant and a blank notebook. I opened to the first page, not to write a takedown, not to relive every bitter detail or every betrayal, but to begin a completely new chapter. Each evening, after returning from the foundation office, I sat in front of that page, peeling back layers of memory, from the years of silence mistaken for duty, to the day I spoke up, and finally, to standing in court refusing to let anyone rewrite my life again. Writing didn't make me forget, but it gave me just enough distance to see clearly. I didn't avoid memories of my mother, Carolyn, or what she had done, but I no longer let her define how I live, how I love, or how I believe in myself. Once, Isabel asked me, "Have you thought about forgiveness?" I shook my head. I don't hold a grudge, but forgiveness isn't something anyone is entitled to. Isabel nodded without another word. She understood. Some wounds don't need to be healed with forgiveness. They just need to be laid down so the person carrying them can move forward. I did see Carolyn again. Once, by chance, in a grocery store parking lot. She sat in her car, head bowed, gripping the steering wheel. As I walked past, she rolled down the window and called my name, her voice hoarse, stripped of its usual sharpness. I stopped, but didn't move closer. "I never knew how to love you," she said, her eyes tired. I nodded, slowly and gently. "I know. Do you hate me?" I paused for a moment, then answered, "I don't need to hate you to walk away from that cycle, but I don't need to come back either." She nodded, and for the first time she didn't defend herself. She didn't blame anyone. I turned and walked away, said nothing more. That silence, for me, was the closure I needed. The book was finished by winter. I titled it The Unchosen One, not out of anger, but to show those who were ever deemed expendable by their own families that being unchosen doesn't mean being worthless. It wasn't a memoir about a legal battle. It was a letter to those who've been told they were too sensitive, too different. At the book launch in a small bookstore downtown, a young woman came up to me. She didn't speak at first. She just pulled a folded letter from her jacket, the handwriting crooked and tense. "I never thought I'd say anything," she said, "but after reading chapter 4, I think maybe it's time." I hugged her tightly. I didn't ask a thing. Sometimes, all it takes is for someone to listen, someone to write it down first. Then the path ahead begins to clear. Slowly, but surely. My fight no longer lives in courtrooms or legal documents. It lives in every child the Reeves Foundation reaches, in every handwritten letter I send back, and in every story I've left behind on the page. I didn't win because I reclaimed property or because I made someone fall. The real victory is this: no one can ever rewrite my story for me again. Naomi's story isn't just about surviving a family lawsuit. It's a powerful reminder that you don't need anyone's permission to live your truth. Even when you're pushed aside, manipulated, or denied, your worth remains untouched. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't forgiveness, it's walking away, saying enough, and rewriting your life line by line, truth by truth. What do you think of Naomi's journey? What would you do in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and choosing your own path.